Hello, Eric.
How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm not too bad. You got the look of a professor.
Uh, good. Thanks for reaching out and nice to meet you.
Yeah, I reach out to a lot of people who work with TBIs just because it's kind of part of my channel and what I do.
Sure.
So speaking of that, I've been reading up on some of your research.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's actually kind of funny because stuff that I kept coming across was TBI survivors and their partner in communication. And that's
Hmm.
something I didn't have. I'm no longer with that person, but it was
Sure.
they didn't want to make that effort. So can you
Right.
tell me more about your research and how that works?
Yeah, absolutely. It's what I do. So, one of the biggest challenges, and you know this, for individuals with TBI is that those social communication situations that are kind of uh,
You can't read the room.
yeah, I think that's a really common thing where there are subtle things that happen within conversation that lead people with brain injuries to have some troubles. The way that they interpret the tone of voice, the body language, and things like that can sometimes lead them down a path where they might misinterpret something that wasn't intended to convey a specific intent. That's a pretty common thing. It's funny because my students are doing a 10-week program called TBI Connect. One of my mentors, Leanne Tor, and her students created this program. And one of the one of the common goals for all 9 couples that are in that program is that all of them have troubles either, well, actually both, misinterpreting the tone or intent of their partners, or conveying an intent through their tone that doesn't that isn't consistent with what they're trying to say. So they might come across as angry or upset when they're not, or they might interpret a partner who is not angry or upset as being angry or upset. So they respond, of course, the way that any human being would, which would be to kind of go on the attack, right? So why are you asking me that? Or why are you so upset? Um, that's a pretty common thing. And there are a number of things like that in communication, especially with your close, your significant others or your close communication partners, whether that's a friend or a colleague or a parent, things like that, that that get in the way of the typical conversation. I think it's pretty common for people with TBIs to have problems with both memory and certain types of memory, like working memory, that allows you to hold information in your mind while you do something with it. And because of that, they have a harder time kind of formulating their own thoughts, and that makes it harder for them to also listen to and respond to their partner's thoughts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with processing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
It's not just processing speed because they told me mine's 50% of an average person, and I was above average.
Yep. Yep.
So they tell you processing speed, which the thing with my ex was I asked her frequently, I said, give me bite size, keep it bite size so I
Yep.
can
Yep.
process it. And
Yep.
it would be every month or two, there'd be a huge dump of shit about me. And it's like,
Yep.
that I can't deal with that. I
Yep.
can't, that's old Eric that could process that and have a talk about it right now, but I just
Yep.
can't do that.
Yep. Agreed. I think that's really a key in terms of strategies, is just a little bit at a time, and really initiating a conversation about kind of that openness of communication. For you to be successful, you need this. For the partner to be successful, they need to do this or to be aware of this. Um, I think I think that's a really good starting point, and just being aware of that can change the way that people interact. Completely agree.
Yeah, I wrote a book. I never knew what I was going to do with it, but I wrote every day, almost every day. I wrote about my life. And what
Yep.
I always told my ex was, I said, I can't speak your language anymore because you essentially speak two different languages.
Hmm.
I said, I can't speak your language, but you can look at this and you can speak my language. And
Yep.
this just never happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not so much misinterpreting cues, it's sometimes missing them altogether.
Oh, yeah, that too. Yeah. Yeah.
I found that like not being able to read people or read a room, same thing.
Same thing. Yep, absolutely. Same exact kind of stuff, for sure.
Now, like, has your research showed any of that where they completely missed stuff, or rather than just misinterpreted?
Oh, yep, absolutely. So I think, when I talked about working memory, you talk about processing, that's a big part of it. What I always tell my students and the clients that I work with is that it's not a matter of you losing your ability to do that. I think you still have the ability to do that after a brain injury. The challenge is when there's too much information to process, right? So then you start cutting stuff out that you would normally take in. And then you're kind of dealing with, missing pieces to that conversation. Um, and I think often that's key information that you're getting from your partner. That makes it pretty tough to be successful when there's too much. So I love the way that you approach that with that idea of give me bite-sized pieces, because that's really how we approach partner training and not really even partner training. I mean, it's collaborative conversational training. Is just increasing awareness of that. Um, for the person with a brain injury, they get to learn some strategies for kind of sorting out or organizing what they want to say, but also for being a better listener. And I say that with not that that people with TBI are not good listeners, but they're not good listeners when and this is true of everyone, by the way, they're not good listeners when they're thinking about what they're going to say next instead of listening, right? And I think a brain injury, when it reduces that processing capacity, puts you in that position a lot, right? Because you're like, well, I have a choice. Either I formulate what I'm going to say or I listen. Because if I just do one, if I just listen, I'm not going to be able to respond. If I just formulate, it's going to be kind of all about me or not specific to the conversation.
Now you see the crux of doing an interview.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that's when I talked to my neurologist, she said, well, this is good for you. You should keep doing this. And that was 2.5 years ago.
Oh, that's cool. That's fantastic. How long ago has it been since your injury was?
It'll be 5 years, October 5th.
Wow, so right around the corner. 5 years, yeah. And as a word of encouragement, I mean, I see people that are 25, 30 years out and they're still getting better. So I'm a firm believer, and I agree with what your neurologist said. The more you do, the more you get better. So
Yeah. And, the way I've always described it to people who don't have one or don't know anybody with one, from the outside looking in, you don't understand it. And from the inside looking out, you can't explain it.
yeah, that's a really good way to think about it. Yep.
And getting me to explain anything to anyone is really difficult because, like, I like to write. I'm a good writer. Not to toot my own horn, but I
Yep.
do like to write. I'm a good writer, but I can't replicate that when I speak.
Yeah. Yep.
I have to, like, when I would talk to my ex about, things that were going on, I'd have to have like a post-it note with an outline to make sure I didn't forget stuff.
Yep. Yep. And that makes sense, right? Because that written information is tangible, it stays. I mean, it's concrete, so it's not evaporating away into the air when you say it.
Do a lot of the people in your studies use post-its a lot?
Yeah, post-its or notebooks. Actually, this is funny because I run a lot of brain injury groups and support groups. They're not even necessarily support groups, but that's a piece of it. But therapy groups, and this in front of me on my desk, which I'm taking notes all over today for my other meetings. This is what they use in our groups, right? They'll sit there and they'll take notes, and those notes are sometimes strategies for a lot of times, like they'll think, oh, I got something to contribute to this thought. my impulse is to interrupt you, but instead I'm going to write it down, and I'm going to use a strategy like I'm going to put my thumb on that thing I want to write, or that I want to come back to. Just a simple thing like that of, I've got a related story, rather than just jumping in with my related story midway through your story. I'm going to use a strategy that's pretty simple, actually, similar to what you said with the post-it notes, of I can return to that written information that popped into my head, but I can't undo kind of the breakdown to the conversation that happens when I just say, there's no way I'm going to remember this unless I say it right now.
Yeah, I experience that frequently, and part of interviewing it makes that really hard.
Yep. Yep.
Because you're trying to think what was the next thing you wanted to ask at the same time, but then I got something to say. I got to say it now, or I'm not going to remember it at the end.
Yep. Yeah. So those, I mean, simple things like that can really help over time. And I do think over time you get less reliant on those. Probably depends on the individual, but a lot of people get less reliant on those over time.
Who do you think learns more in your studies, the TBI survivor or the partner?
Really good question. Boy, if there was a third option, I would say me. One of the reason I love those interactions and looking at that real authentic interaction is that I learn tons. I always consider both the partners and the individuals with TBIs the experts. So I know I'm learning more than both of them. And I don't say that in an arrogant way. I say that as they just have a lot more knowledge. Like, you have a lot more knowledge than I do about living with a TBI. I think it depended, in terms of the person with a brain injury versus their partner, I think it depends on the relationship, and how open they are to change. Because some partners are pretty open to that. Sometimes it takes them a while to get to the point where they're open to that, because I think maybe like your former significant other, sometimes they feel like it's not my problem. I shouldn't be the one who has to fix it. We had our TBI Connect group yesterday, and that came out loud and clear from one of the partners, who said, I'm willing to change, and I'm willing to change some things about my communication, but I don't need to change everything, because quite frankly, then it would change who I am. And he didn't say, or that person didn't say outright, and it's not my problem, or it's not my impairment, but that was pretty clearly conveyed. And I think so in cases like that, the partners can learn a lot, because if that attitude shifts, that gives that person the potential to start providing supports, or even just not throwing out landmines for their partner with a brain injury, because that's pretty common too, right? Like, I'm going to just go about this the way I always do, and by the way, here's some obstacles for you to jump around. If the partner starts to accept part of the responsibility for that conversation, rather than just feeling like they should do it the same way they always do, then that can really change the success of the person with the brain injury.
I'm about to lose the thought that I had.
Sorry, I went a little too long on that. Sorry.
No. It was about the partner. That partner that said that, was it a male?
It was in this case. Yep.
Because there's two different processes on that. See, there's no playbook for any of us here. I mean, no brain injury is the same, for one.
Right.
But your life circumstances are completely different. Like, I'm on disability now, so I have to piece the way I live my life together from other people. Like, talking to people like you helps. Other TBI survivors helps. My mom got hurt at the same age. I was hurt 32 when I got hit by the car.
Okay.
And my mom got hurt. She was a nurse at work, same age, and ended up on disability. So I get a lot from her, but there's not one person I can go to get all my information.
Yep. Agreed. I I think that's one of the strengths of brain injury groups is that you get you get kind of a whole range of different ideas or different ways that people have tried to manage or cope with things, and some fit and some don't. And and the other thing that's really important about that, a lot of people in our groups talk about like age after injury. So you'd be like 5, right? And some people are like 10, 12, 13 years out, things like that. I think it not only individuals are different, but where you are in that timeline of recovery is different too. That, you might have someone give you the perfect solution for 12 years out, but it may not be the right solution for 5 years out, so to speak. Um, so yeah, I just think having, a network of peers who actually get it puts you in a more likely position to have, some peer that gets what you're talking about at any given moment and can really identify with it.
Do your studies separate out the partners who were with the person at the time of their TBI, or the people that are there that come into the picture later?
Yeah, really good question. Because that makes a huge difference. Yeah,
Yes.
that can make a very, very big difference. Um, a little bit, not, I haven't had the numbers to really be able to make strong statements about and that's just due to the nature of my research. It's more applied. It's so you tend to get smaller numbers because that's all the time. It takes a lot of time just to process all of the information from that. But what we do see is that people struggle more with partners who were there before the brain injury than they do with new partners. It's kind of like the new partners that they never knew the old person, so they just accept that new person. But for partners who have an expectation of you should be able to do this and you were always good at that, that can be really difficult for them to deal with, for
Yeah,
sure.
there's a lot of fear that's involved. Fear of one thing you can't, you're going to lose your job for one, but
Yeah.
also fear that your relationship's going to end.
Yep. Yeah, that's a really common fear. Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and the phrase, I remember what I was going to ask you, but then I just forgot it again. Um, sometimes it can happen that quickly, and the funny thing is, people don't believe me when I say that. I'm like, no, it's true. I can
Yeah.
forget stuff that quickly, mid thought. But
Yeah.
even though partners, like that one said, I'm not willing to change everything because it changes who I am. I think first you have to start with empathy. A little empathy will go a long way. You know,
Yep.
you may not
Absolutely.
understand everything that's going on, but you can still show me that you're empathetic towards the situation.
Yeah. 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 And that's one of the things we talk about a lot in terms of that partner training is just having that empathy and being able to hear and listen to their partner with a brain injury about things that they actually struggle with. I think one of the great things about like the TBI Connect program that we do right now is that partners hear from other people with brain injuries who are saying the same things as their partner is, right? So they're hearing this is hard for me too. And for some of the partners, I can see just the relief on their face, right? Like I thought this was just my, partner with a brain injury, but everyone's experiencing, I mean, across the group, all 9 couples are experiencing the same thing. And there's something that helps to build empathy about that because then you get to, you start to think, oh, so this is like a real thing. Yep. And I don't know why that would people would question that.
They
And
question
I
it
don't
because
think
they
it
can't
means that
see
they're
it.
right. Yep. Yep. Because I don't think it means that they're a bad partner or that, they're not empathetic. I think it's just that a little bit of that human nature, like, and not only can they not see it, but they see like you said, the opposite of that at times. Like you did, you remembered those things just now. Why can't you remember it in this situation? And they don't recognize why there's so much volatility or variability, because that's what frustrates, I think, a lot of partners. Like, you did it then, do it now. There's no excuse for you not being able to do it when I know you're capable of doing it. But when they start to understand that that relates to the environment and to the task and all of those different factors, then it becomes easier for them to, and seeing it in numbers too, right? Like with other individuals with brain injuries, then they can kind of start to say, okay, so this is the real deal. It's not something that they can control necessarily, things like that. That helps to build that empathy.
Yeah, and like you said a while back, back to the beginning with misinterpreting cues and everything coming out like you respond with anger. That was for early on, for that first 2 years. The only emotion that I had that I could ever respond with was anger. I didn't know how to process anything else. It's like my brain had one button, right? Actually, it had two buttons. So the button that it normally pushed was, I'm going to respond with anger because I don't know what else to do. And then in certain situations, it would press the button for deflect with inappropriate humor.
Oh,
That was the other one.
yeah.
But that was the less pressed.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty common too. Definitely. Yeah, and it makes sense because I mean, when you're used to, and you said you're an intelligent guy, I totally believe that. And when you say that your processing is limited, that's like being able to see, that tip of the tongue phenomenon with everything. Like, I know what it is, and I just can't quite get to it. I can kind of see the old me and how I would have thought through this, and there's just not it. There's not the wavelength or the capacity to have access to what is right there in front of you.
I like saying, normal people, their brains are like a V8. They fire on all cylinders when they wake up every morning. Most days, I fire on 4. I got the V8 still, but it's only firing on 4. Some days, though, it'll fire on all 8. Like, you'll see a glimpse of who I used to be.
Yep. Yeah,
Adderall helps that too, but
yeah, that's a great metaphor. I think there's a terrific metaphor for kind of thinking about what's there. Because I mean, that's the tough experience. And for partners, they can't see why, if you're able to fire on 8 cylinders one day, that you're just not doing that more consistently. And whether they attribute that to effort or to what, I don't know what, but that can cause some frustration, and they really need to understand that that's just how the machine is working now.
Yeah, it's hard for us because there's not too many people who do understand us.
Right. And to really truly understand, I mean, the only people who are really there are people that have had your same experience. So other people with brain injuries, partners are close if they're good listeners and they're empathetic, but some aren't as good as others. I always tell my students that the most learning that I do on people with brain injuries is from people with brain injuries, not from any of the readings that I do, from any of the studies that I do. It's just being in there, experiencing those conversations and the challenges that people with brain injuries face. So I think that's where it has to start, and that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about the partner training and the couple training, is that you have to be in the same context and working on the same thing for, to make that impact and to change the awareness of partners and the empathy of partners, those kinds of things.
What made you want to get into studying brain injuries? What was the reasoning behind that?
I'm just fascinated with communication in general. Fascinated with things related to awareness and how we change that awareness over time, how we support that recovery. Um, I I think that's what led me down that path. Um, I actually was in school. I did my undergrad, looking to go into physical therapy, um, and I shadowed a physical therapist who was working with individuals with brain injury on, you know, walking and, strengthening and things like that. And I remember her saying one day, you should go and follow the speech pathologist with these same patients, right? These same clients. Um, and I was like, cool. And I didn't even give it any thought. I was, going PT. But when I started following the speech pathologist, I was like, oh, this is the stuff. This is exactly what I'm interested in. So it was, I mean, I knew right in that moment that that's what I wanted to do. So
I thought about going back to school to become a neuropsychologist. I'm like, it takes one to know one.
yeah.
Only problem is, I actually have a psych degree, so I
Okay.
have one of them, but
Yeah.
it's taking exams. I don't know if I can actually retain enough to pass.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't matter what accommodations you would give me. It's like the only thing you could do is open book, open note. But other than that, I don't know if I could retain it. That's why I thought about taking classes at like a community college
Yeah.
to see if I could handle it for low risk.
Yeah. 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 If you ever do go that route, speech pathologists are better than neuropsychologists.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
going to say that. One of the reasons that we always say that is neuropsychologists know all of those same things, but they just use it to assess. Very few actually do intervention. Um, we we're the ones that do the lion's share of the intervention and connect with people with brain injuries. And yeah, because I thought about going that route too, and I just think I want to do more than assess. I want to help people, um, and I want to do that in the long haul. Help people continue to improve day in and day out, and participate more in life, and do the kinds of things that they want to do. Have the kinds of friends and social network that they want. That's that's what we're working towards. So
So I'll get you out of here on this one. What is the most surprising thing you've learned from someone in your studies? Just throw out the most surprising thing you've ever heard.
yeah, I think the thing that was a real game changer for me happened actually in my dissertation research. I had someone who, before her brain injury, was incredibly intelligent. She was a CEO of a really, you'd probably say, a Fortune 500 company. And her conversational partners had this just tremendous burden, just to keep her on track. And when we would do interviews after our intervention, we'd say, so how did that go? And they say, I think it went pretty well. And we talk about how much of the conversation burden did you carry? And they would say most of it, right? To make it as successful as it was. And when we interviewed her, one of the first things she said was, yeah, my communication partners did all of the work. I couldn't do that without their support, right? So I look good because of their support. And she said something really profound. It's not because I don't want to. It's not because I don't want to, ask them questions about themselves and kind of have this more reciprocal back and forth conversation. It's just because I can't. I can do one thing at a time, and a good communication partner allows me to look really good, right? So that I can respond and so that I can ask them questions. But without that, I can't. And I think that was really profound to me. And it reminded me of this principle that I really hold very dear, which is that people with brain injuries aren't any different in some ways than they were before. They have the same interests, the same values. I think they have the same potential in terms of cognition. I don't think people lose that much, but access to that knowledge and access to be able to communicate that is where the breakdown happens. So you can have someone who has a Ferrari engine in their car, but if they can't access that, it's kind of, it loses its value. That's what makes it tough. So finding ways to support their ability to be successful, begins with the partners, and that's what led me in that direction. So
Funny, I don't know if you know this, but Ferraris have a V12.
V12, yes.
Mhm.
I've actually, when I was in college, I built homes. I worked with my uncles, and we built a home for a gentleman who did car maintenance for all of the stars. So I sat in Ahmad Rashad's Ferrari, and I also sat in his Silver Ghost Rolls Royce at one point. So things you never knew you'd get an opportunity to do, but yeah, fun
Did he
stuff.
play for the Bears?
I think he did. Yeah, he played for the Vikings for a little bit, but they never keep anyone very long. So I think he might have played for
I'm
the
thinking
Bears.
of Rashad Salam.
Oh, yep. I think he did. Yeah, Rashad Salam did for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Jerry, thanks for giving me some time today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. You're welcome. It's been a fun conversation.
I'll have to look into speech pathology then.
Yeah, there you go. That's the good stuff. So,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to see what brain injury grants are out there because I obviously don't have the money to go back to school.
there should be some things out there in vocational rehab. So,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Thanks
So,
again, Jerry. I hope you have a good weekend.
thanks. You too. And again, reach out at any time.
All right. Have a good one.